Can I show you something?
Yeah, what you got?
It's a mushroom brick. We actually made a brick out of mushrooms. I'm pretty happy with it.
And why do you have that?
Well, there's actually this whole movement of researchers and engineers and architects who are all looking for a more sustainable building material. Right now, the construction of new buildings accounts for more than 1/10 of all the world's annual carbon dioxide emissions. A lot of that comes from the materials used, things like cement, which is responsible for pumping out almost 4 times as much CO2 as the entire aviation industry. So we just really need alternatives.
And we're gonna solve that with mushrooms.
Well, we made this brick because we wanted to check out the whole process. Foraging for a mushroom, growing it in a petri dish, all the way to stress testing.
Oh, shoot.
We wanted to see what mushrooms are really capable of.
And how did all that go?
So, to start, we needed to find a mushroom sample. I don't know the first thing about mushrooms, so I found someone who does.
This is the gem-studded puffball. It's edible when it's white on the inside. And this is a deadly toxic mushroom called the destroying angel. If you eat this, you will die.
This is William Padilla Brown. He knows a lot about mushrooms.
I have cultivated over 35 species of mushrooms: Cordyceps militaris, Talipocladium ophioglissoides, Graphola frondosa, Hericium erinaceus, Hericium americanum, Foliota adiposa. Geez, there's so many Latin names, it's hard to always remember all of them.
We drove out to the forests of Pennsylvania to enlist William's help finding the perfect mushroom sample. He's a regular in these woods.
I spend a lot of time in the forest collecting various organisms, bringing them back to the lab, getting to understand their DNA intimately, experimenting with them for potential medicinal or culinary value.
William focuses most of his research on the Cordyceps militaris mushroom,
which are an entomopathogenic fungi, which means they grow on insects in the wild.
He published the first English handbook on its cultivation.
Now there are people cultivating cordyceps, which has been really exciting to watch the process of that happen from like my bedroom to houses and farms all around.
Wandering through the forest, foraging for fungi. This wasn't always the case for William.
I grew up in cities. Trees weren't even like a thing to me. It was just like background colors. My brain didn't recognize natural patterns whatsoever.
Then William had an epiphany.
Am I allowed to say like whatever?
A mushroom-related epiphany.
I went in the woods and I started to realize that I'm connected to all of this. I started to find the really interesting, unique, delightful aspects of the forests. And then after that, the passion that I developed around natural ecosystems drove me to dive into a better understanding, which I found through science.
After a short hike, he led us to this tree, a black locust, and growing on that tree,
Phalinus robina, the cracked cap polypore mushroom. It's a beautiful specimen here.
William says this is a great species for building with.
This mushroom is very hard and corky, and the mycelium will retain some of those properties as well. I'm not gonna take the whole thing down, that'd be disrespectful. I'm just gonna take a piece of it. It's so corky. Should be enough.
This tiny snip of mushroom was our starting point. Back at William's lab, he dropped even smaller tissue samples into some agar, basically food for the mycelium.
And we only need like a tiny piece of the mycelium to make this grow out.
And with a few petri dishes in tow, we headed back to New York. Next, we needed to grow the brick, which took some time. Some of our samples molded, and some of them didn't grow much at all. But we got a couple samples with clean mycelium fibers. That's all this white stuff on the petri dish. Mycelium is like the roots of a tree. They snake out seeking food and form a fibrous network throughout the forest. The dense, crisscrossing mycelium fibers gives it its strength. So we wanted to grow the mycelium and coax it into a useful shape. This part was tedious. Move the fuzzy gunk into a small jar full of grains. Wait a week. Move the result into a bigger jar full of sawdust pellets and soybean hulls. Wait another week. Cram that all into a mold in the shape of a brick. Wait another week. And hope all the while that the mycelium inside keeps growing denser and stronger. So if you're paying attention, that's over 4 weeks. So while we waited, I called up David Benjamin.
Hi, how are you?
He is an architect who sees a lot of potential in mycelium as a green building material.
It's a great moment to be exploring it.
In 2014, David built a tower out of mycelium bricks as a way to showcase mushrooms' potential, and it went on display in New York City.
We ended up creating a pavilion that was about 40 feet tall. The actual thing that we made this new architecture out of is a new kind of brick out of agricultural waste and mycelium.
After that, he got even more ambitious for another exhibit in Paris.
For this one, we deliberately kept the building blocks alive in a way that we could put 2 bricks or 2 blocks next to each other, and in just the right conditions, they would grow together.
This might look and sound kind of bizarre, but mushroom bricks actually have a lot going for them compared to more polluting building materials. You don't need to burn fossil fuels to produce them, and when you're done with them, they don't leave behind a toxic mess.
We could make architecture by kind of growing the building block materials, then make a structure, and then at the end of the useful life, return that structure, all those materials, back to the earth instead of having them sit in a landfill for hundreds or thousands of years.
More than a month after our trip to the woods with William, we had a mold full of mycelium. We popped the material out of the mold and into the oven. Baking it on low heat for a few hours stops the mushroom from growing. And finally, mushroom brick. I was just surprised by how light this is. It almost feels like a piece of wood, I guess. Yeah, it does kind of sound like knocking on wood. It is cracking a little bit. Hey, I've never made a brick out of mushrooms before. I don't know anyone else who has, so I'm impressed. So what should an eco-minded designer do with a brick like this? Building an entire structure would be ambitious. Mushroom bricks alone are not as strong as concrete. So this means a stress test for 2 other really promising uses. We got some help for this bit too.
Yes, there we go. I think I got the settings good. Okay.
Sonia Travaglini is a mechanical engineer at UC Berkeley.
I think it's going to be amazing. And, you know, a lot of these tests are really the first sort of experiments you do to help you understand intuitively what these materials can do.
The first is a strength test to use our material as infill for walls that aren't load-bearing. Mycelium used this way wouldn't have to hold anything up. It'd just have to carry its own weight.
So we're gonna do a DIY compression test. We're basically gonna stack these 38-pound cinder blocks on top of the mushroom brick to see if it squishes.
Compression tests are really good to understand how much weight or how much force a material can withstand until it squishes.
Did it squish?
This is more of a sort of rough and ready, perhaps preliminary test just to see if you're in the right ballpark figure of strength.
Last one. Please don't fall on my foot. Is it squishing a lot? Let's take it one step further and get some more weight on there. Nice.
Next up, the chocolate test. How well could mycelium insulate a building?
So I would recommend doing this outdoors and with plenty of PPE.
On one side of the brick, a chocolate bar that melts at around body temperature. On the other side, a blowtorch. You can see where this is going.
Here we go.
The easiest way to see if something will go on fire is to set it on fire.
Oh man, I think this thing is catching fire. 19 to 20, all right. Oh shoot.
I think it's okay, it's okay.
You know what? The chocolate is not even soft. After 20 seconds of direct heat, a flame, a blowtorch on this side of the brick. The other side of the brick is unharmed, and so is the chocolate.
I think it's really smoking.
Yeah, I think we gotta put it out. All right, thanks for donating your water, Corey.
There's a long way to go to develop mycelium building materials further to make sure they'll perform as well, if not better, than the stuff they're replacing. Meanwhile, other people are working on making clothes and even leather-like shoes with material made from mushrooms. Mycelium also turns out to be a good alternative to plastic and styrofoam in packaging. There are so many possibilities. William sums it up well.
Fungi are some of the most ancient and most resilient organisms. They've survived every single mass extinction, and they've been here for the longest time, and they hold that wisdom. I feel as though nature gave us everything we need if we look in the right places.
Thanks to Lexus for their support. Be sure to check out the new 2021 Lexus IS by going to lexus.com/IS. Their campaign is about going all in on your passion and getting a greater reward, which is why they've sponsored this series on researchers and innovators. They don't influence our editorial, but they do help make productions like this viable. So thanks again to them, and thank you for watching.